had an incident in the newsroom in 2019, and it landed me on the floor of the bathroom during a live newscast, and then ended up with a lot of questions. I was having hot flashes, my heart was racing out of control, having problems with the teleprompter, not sure what was going on. That kind of took me down this rabbit hole of like trying to figure out what was happening, why I didn't have the information, why my doctors had never warned me or told me or prepared me.
If men had some physiological change that happened to their body that made it harder for them to be productive and do work and show up as their best selves, you better believe there would be funding to the hilt, and we would not have this conversation or this issue. It would already be solved. So did you know that there's something that actually impacts 51% of the world population and costs companies something to the tune of billions with a B, and yet gets very little coverage? If you haven't guessed it yet, that is women's health, and more specifically, menopause. And that's what we are here to discuss today. So due to our rapidly aging world population, this is not something we can just ignore or push to the sidelines. This is something we actually really have to get ahead of and start tackling now. So we're going to talk through how some companies are actually doing this. Some are probably doing it fairly well, but a lot are doing it not at all. And I'm sure there's a huge range in terms of the efficacy of those efforts. But some companies are actually doing it so poorly that you could think that maybe it was a part of HBO Silicon Valley, like that bad. And I, of course, had the misfortune of working for one such company that did it in such a way that if I had actually been in that room for the women's health discussion, I probably would have literally punched holes in the walls. That's how bad it was. And by the way, do not run to my LinkedIn. Do not go look. I did not put this company on there because I don't want to be associated with it. I'm embarrassed to ever have been there. But just to give you a little example of exactly how bad this attempt at discussing women's health was, they had a session for the employee resource group, allegedly there to support women and allies at the company. And they titled this session, Navigating the Uniqueness of the Female Body. Yeah, that's what they called it. And I have receipts to prove it. My friends were like, no, that did not happen to you in 2023, Maureen. And I was like, actually, here's the proof. So I'm going to show you that it is, in fact, what went down. So we'll go down the sort of masterclass of how not to do it. But yes, it needs to be done. It just has to be handled extremely cautiously and with the right tone. So that was not it. So hang on for that. Buckle up. We'll get there. So I'm going to be laying down some compelling facts about why menopause matters in the workplace, but I'm also later going to be joined in the episode by a special guest, Tamsen Fadal. Now, if you don't know Tamsen, she was a longtime New York City journalist and anchor for many years, and she had an incident in the newsroom that basically brought her to where she is now, which is essentially a menopause awareness advocate. And she is doing incredible work out there. She has a massive social media following. She's about to publish a book. She's also launching a brand new menopause documentary, actually, next week in October. It's Menopause Awareness Month, guys. October is Menopause Awareness Month. So I'm really excited to sit down with her and have her share a little bit of her story with you. It's really compelling. So buckle up. It's going to be a great episode. I'm really excited to share this one with you. It's overdue. You know, women are 51% of the population, and this podcast is all about getting older in the workplace. So we need to have this conversation. And so hopefully this will be a good jumping off point for a lot of people to start thinking about this and start bringing awareness to the issue in their workplaces. Okay, so first, let's start with the literal definition of menopause, which, you know, believe it or not, probably a good number of people out there don't really know. I mean, I'm a woman, and I don't think I really heard this talked about, which is so wild. It's been so stigmatized in our society. But nonetheless, menopause really means that it's been at least 12 months since your last menstrual period. And that time typically happens for women around an average age of 51, for context, okay? So you may have heard of some of the symptoms that come with menopause. I mean, I think the one that's been most talked about openly is the concept of hot flashes, where people get really, really overheated, uncomfortably so, in inopportune moments. Although I guess I can't really think of a time that would be really fun to be overheated. But these are sort of what we've seen and heard about menopause in popular media, or maybe you've heard like in passing from our friends or family who happen to have gone through it. That's the one that really kind of was the only one, I guess, that I really had associated with menopause. But there are definitely plenty more out there, which I didn't really know about. So some other symptoms of menopause that aren't talked about quite as much include dry mouth, include insomnia. There can be incidents of brain fog, which was interesting that came up right there for me, which is fabulous. So there's some other really unsavory things, including like mood disruptions, irritability, that sort of stuff that is often comorbid with hitting menopausal age. So lots of things to contend with, but there are also some super serious increases of health risks that are associated with hitting menopausal age. And they include things like risk of heart disease increasing, risk of stroke increasing, osteoporosis. There's some really fun ones. Type 2 diabetes is another one that apparently is coming up in terms of increase with menopausal age. So there's some really serious things that can happen alongside people who have gotten to this point in their lives, right? So exactly how big of a section of the population is it that is menopausal? This is a big deal, guys. Like literally 6,000 women every single day in the United States alone are hitting menopausal age. 6,000. So you've heard of the silver tsunami, which is to suggest that the population itself is aging rapidly, but there's also this massive onslaught of people who are going through menopause during the same time frame as we get older, right? So this is something that you can't just kind of sweep under the rug. It's happening to a lot of people. It's also worth mentioning that there's something called perimenopause, which is to suggest like the time frame around menopause that has some relatively terrible symptoms and associations as well. So this is something that I don't even think I had heard the term until super recently. And I am 41, almost 42. And so I should have heard about perimenopause because I'm the demographic for perimenopause. And there's some really awful associated symptoms with that too, none of which I had heard about whatsoever. And again, this just blows my mind because I'm a woman and I go to the doctor and I'm like a fairly health conscious person. So it shocks me that this has just been left off the table. So not only is it the 6,000 women a day reaching menopause, but it's also people who are approaching perimenopause, right? So I'm looking at you like millennials, older millennials, this impacts you too. And as far as the number of women who are impacted by this, some of the stats that I found were really pretty staggering. So the AARP did a survey of women over 35, and 90% of the respondents said that they had experienced one or more of these symptoms, which include hot flashes, night sweats, or mood changes, none of which sounds fun. So again, the scope of this issue is really large and it impacts women across a wide swath of their lives. In fact, these symptoms can last for up to 20 years. 20 years. This is a big part of life. So we can't just pretend it's not happening. We can't pretend it doesn't matter. All right, so let's translate what this actually means for the workplace itself. The Mayo Clinic did some research and they found that productivity losses amounted to up to 1.8 billion with a B dollars. Okay, so a massive hit to the economy. And then on top of that, you have an additional, they said around $24 billion associated healthcare costs around menopause. This is a big deal. This is not a nothing burger. So women's health company MIDI, which is doing great work out there, and Tamsen later will reference them in our conversation, but MIDI actually did some research as well. And one of the things that they cited in their research was a Yale professor who was named Philip Serrell, and he said that hot flashes alone, just one of many symptoms in menopause, hot flashes alone cost companies about $340 million a year, which equates to around $1,300 per woman impacted by hot flashes. That's just hot flashes, guys. So there are far more symptoms associated with menopause that could also have adverse impact. You know, the brain fog we talked about, the insomnia we talked about, all of which indicates that people are not having the greatest time at work, right? And they're not necessarily going to be able to function to their fullest degree, which could, again, impact quality of work and that sort of stuff. And for further context, there are 50 million women in the American workforce, 50 million. And as I said earlier, some of these symptoms can range for up to 20 years of a woman's life. So if you employ women at your company, which you sure better, this is happening at your company. There are women going through this, silently suffering through these physiological changes. Most of the women surveyed say they want to see employers and the government doing more to support women in their menopause years. And this is something that it seems like it's such an own goal not to do, right? Because you have hopefully a good number, certainly in tech, we need to work on this, but you have a good percentage of your workplace that is made up of women. You need to support them. So the healthcare company MIDI says that 99% of women report menopause symptoms, 99%. And 59% of those women polled said that they've had to take time off due to their menopause symptoms. So again, this is a big issue. Now, what happens if you treat menopause, if you help women through their symptoms in the workplace? A lot of good things happen, as it turns out. As you might imagine, it would have, right? So that healthcare company MIDI said that there are huge benefits for companies who actually address women's health in the workplace. So those include a 91% symptom reduction in treating menopause over the first 60 days that women get treatment. They say that the mental health improvements are massive. 92% of women who are surveyed report that their moodiness, depression, their anxiety, all of that has gone down. And guess what? Happier employees stay employees, right? People are always looking for tenure at these companies. And so if you have happy employees, that's going to help them stay. They're not going to be looking around for what's better. Okay, so I have to address something. I really hope that no one in this audience, either listening or watching this podcast, would ever even have something like this cross their minds. But nonetheless, I have to say it. Some people might say, oh, well, the solution is simply just not to employ women, right? Obviously, that's wrong. Obviously, that's a terrible idea. 51% of the world population, if you subscribe to the notion that you should actually have a representative group within your organization so you can actually know what the customer needs, that would be on its face a just abysmally stupid business decision. Obviously morally wrong. I hope I don't have to say that either. That's not the answer. And then also when you look into some of the research about spending, women touch like 70 to 85% of spending decisions across a broad swath of spending categories. So again, it would be incredibly dumb to make that your solution. So nobody think that. That would be wildly stupid. Another thing to note, tech, I don't know how you don't see this, but menopause and helping women in general is a really big business opportunity. So maybe get on that. It's stunning to me that still in 2024 or 2023, the last time the research came out, the funding for women-founded companies is still ludicrously low. Like I want to say it's 2 to 3% maximum for women-founded companies. And again, if you subscribe to the concept that if you can't understand a population, you can't possibly serve them, it's just stupid business, again, not to fund women-founded companies. So come on, venture capitalists, get on board. So some companies are out there now targeting women and working on women's health. Kudos. I think we'll see a lot more of them because it's just smart, sound business at the end of the day. Another thing I have to say, and it might get me some hate, but I don't care. I'm going to say it anyway. If men had some physiological change that happened to their body that made it harder for them to be productive and do work and show up as their best selves, you better believe there would be funding to the hilt and we would not have this conversation or this issue. It would already be solved, okay? So let's recognize that. So we need to get a hold of this. This is ridiculous. And actually, there's more research to support that this is made to be a joke at work. And again, this is only because it's women, right? It happens to women. That's why we're going to find jokes about it. But a woman out of the UK, a doctor out of the UK, Dr. Louise Newsome, did some research, and she found that 41% of women reported that they had seen their symptoms of menopause joked about at the office. Again, imagine that would never happen with men. It just wouldn't. It's not cool. It's just not cool. Menopause is not a joke. Right, so I've made the case for why companies should actually give a damn about menopause in the workplace. And now I'm going to tell you exactly how not to do it. And that is by sharing my own personal experience, having worked at a tech company that attempted to have a conversation about women's health. It was essentially a masterclass on how not to do it. It was so bad. So I was at this company and they had this session that they opened up to the entire organization. So anyone at the company could go. And the session that was supporting this women and allies at the company ERG group, employee resource group, the session was called, as I mentioned earlier, Navigating the Uniqueness of the Female Body. So when I actually got to the point where I was willing to sit in this pre-recorded session, which took a minute, by the way, because I was just aghast. I was like, how do you call this session Navigating the Uniqueness of the Female Body? First of all, like 51% of the population, how do we call that unique? Like, no, just a hard pass. But then when I got there, oh my gosh. And we're going to show you some of these visuals because you have to see it to believe it. They had diagrams of the uterus. They explained what a period was. Now, it's worth mentioning, of course, that this whole session barely touched menopause at all. And that makes a ton of sense, seeing as though I was probably one of maybe 3 women that I knew at the company who were approaching or over 40. I mean, everyone else at this company was so young. So of course they're not going to look into menopause really. They're going to focus on, your period and childbearing years and all that stuff. So that was extremely telling. It's like, tell me you don't really focus on hiring people over 40 without telling me you don't really focus on hiring people over 40, right? So again, telling. They explained that women have basically 7 years in total over their lives that they have their period, which again, like, why are we talking about, like, am I in 7th grade life skills or am I at work? Like, what is happening here? They said 2 out of 5 women have missed work due to period symptoms. And then they said that they were concerned because 1 out of 5 women did not feel comfortable sharing the reason for their absence with their manager as being related to their period, which again, I'm like, why would anyone need to describe what was going on to their manager? That is so above and beyond. It's not a problem. Like, if you're sick, you're sick. You don't explain why, especially if you're working in a male dominated industry like tech. You're not going to go up to your boss and say, hey boss, like Aunt Flo's in town. That's just not going to happen. Okay. It's a ludicrous thing to suggest that that's a problem. So any sort of health concern, you don't need to share that with your boss. It's none of their business. So one of the slides in there really got me. And it was a picture of a brain alongside a diagram of the uterus. And the question was written, who is in charge? Who is in charge, the brain or the uterus? And obviously that's ridiculously offensive and insane. And just for a minute, imagine if you were to see something like that, but with male reproductive organs. It's just like, how did someone think this was okay? And then my personal favorite part of the whole session was when they said, your period doesn't just impact you, it also impacts your colleagues. Yeah. And then what was funny was they also had a follow-up survey, an anonymous survey at the end where they're like, oh, let us know how you feel about this session. And in the feedback for the session, they had a whole section where you could select the specific health conditions that you've experienced as a woman in the workplace and share that with, whoever's collecting these responses. What? I'm not telling you that. Are you kidding me? But all of this was so mishandled, and I was just absolutely horrified. Like, I was livid, and I was so glad that I was leaving that organization. Let me tell you, I couldn't believe, and that was not the only thing that happened at the organization that was really bad in terms of how they were treating women. And of course, they say that they care about diversity, that it's a core tenet, core value of theirs. And then you look at their top leadership and there are literally 0 women except for a co-lead of marketing or something like that. It was atrocious. And it's just like, how is this 2020? How is it 2023 at the time? And again, it was really interesting because the whole presentation was actually created, as far as I know, and delivered by women. So I'm like, is the internalized misogyny that bad? Like, how did no one recognize how poorly done this was? And how did we get to the point where it's published for months on the company intranet, if you will? So again, a stunning masterclass on how not to handle women's health at work. Do not do any of the things that I just discussed. Companies, stop. Don't even think about it. Okay. So we need to discuss women's health in the workplace, but we need to do it with a very, very delicate touch in such a way that it does not further stigmatize or other women. We already are having a hard enough time making it in this patriarchal world. Let's not add to the problem here. All right. So we got through that. And now we are going to pivot into something a little bit more hopeful and inspiring, which is the visit that I had with Tamsen Fadal. She's going to share her personal story, how she wound up in this wild world of menopause awareness and advocacy, and some of the companies that she sees doing good things out there, as well as what she thinks companies need to do to help women on their way. So we are going to roll that.
Welcome to It Gets Late Early. Today I have a very special guest. I have Tamsen Fadal, who is really quite the inspiration. I mean, you have a wonderful resume. It's pretty wild. So yeah, longtime journalist, 13-time Emmy Award winning journalist. I mean, that's not bad. And now you've shifted into a new era, which I think is incredibly inspiring. You now are a midlife advocate and menopause awareness like promoter, I guess I would say. Well, you're letting everybody know this is happening, it's coming. And so I love the nonlinear career path. I'm always a fan of that. So thank you for spreading the message with all of
Thank you.
us. Yeah, super psyched to have you. So you had an experience at work, which it sounds like you weren't necessarily prepared for. And I know I myself am not prepared for. And I'm so glad that you're spreading the word about what is potentially to come. So tell us a little bit about how you wound up on this path towards menopause advocacy.
Yeah, I had an incident in the newsroom in 2019, and it landed me on the floor of the bathroom during a live newscast, and then ended up with a lot of questions. I was having hot flashes, my heart was racing out of control, having problems with the teleprompter, not sure what was going on, and that kind of took me down this rabbit hole of like trying to figure out what was happening, why I didn't have the information, why my doctors had never warned me or told me or prepared me. And so that started like well into the pandemic, and it has not stopped my asking questions. And, it moved me into a different area in terms of the type of storytelling that I'm interested in doing, because I think that there is such a lack of resource and a lack of education when it comes to what's going on in this time in our lives. But more importantly, I think this also moved me into asking a lot of questions about my own life and what was important to me and where I was because where I thought I should be versus where I wanted to be. So anyway, that's how I got here. And I started a couple of years ago working on a documentary about menopause to try to educate women. And so that's kind of what my storytelling has brought me to now.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, I think that there's so much room for a lot of improvement and in the realm of women's health in the workplace. And what would you say companies should do if they're looking to help women who are experiencing perimenopause and menopause in the workplace?
I mean, I think they have to do exactly what we're all doing. First, we never want menopause to become a liability or a problem or an issue or oh my gosh, I can't hire her. I heard all the things she's going to go through. So we want to make sure it never punishes us or works against us. But I think with more education and more information, that's not going to be the case. And more women we see that are, in control or at the helm of companies, I think is also very helpful to us. I think what we have to do is educate. And I know that's such a like vague term, like get educated. But I do think that we have to do that in a lot of different ways in doctors' offices. We have to do it with each other in relationships. We have to do it with our children. We have to do it with, everyone needs to kind of know what's going on, because all women, if they're lucky enough to live this long, are going to go through this transition. This transition doesn't last forever. You're in menopause forever, but the symptoms and the difficult part of it don't last forever. So I think as long as we know what to listen, when you know what to expect and you're not surprised or sideswiped by something, it just makes it a little bit easier, even if the symptoms aren't. And I think that that's what we have to do. And I think we also have to stop being squeamish and use the word taboo in the same sentence as we use the word menopause. I think that's not okay.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And I think, part of the problem that I've seen is there are very few women who are older than I am in the workplace. And I imagine that may have been the case for you in the news business too, which is one that is famously youth obsessed, youth centric. And I think hopefully this is something that over the course of time, as more women stay in the workplace, this will dissipate somewhat.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, I think we just don't know what we don't know. And I can tell you, I watch your videos on social media, and there was one that you put out recently where you were making a smoothie. It was very captivating. It was like you're putting a smoothie together, and you were also discussing 34 symptoms of menopause that, I was completely unaware of. And so that's why I think, yeah, I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, honestly, maybe I'm in perimenopause at this point. Like, I honestly think I might be in perimenopause, and I'm 41.
Yeah.
So, but
surprising. That wouldn't be, but it would be surprising if you didn't know those symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I think the work that you're doing is so important. Have you, in the work that you've done, have you come across organizations that are doing this exceptionally well that we can shed light on?
I think there's a lot of different people that are doing it really well. I mean, one of the, big resources that I think a lot of people and doctors use is the Menopause Society, because they have a lot of the studies that are there, so you can look at the background and information. I think there's some telehealth companies that do it really well, among them Alloy, MIDI, Maven, Evernow. I mean, those are some of the sources for that. I think that when I see a lot of the information out there, the most important thing, I guess, out of everything is to make sure that the information you're getting is information that, is backed up, scientifically based, is not, something that people are hoping or guessing. And I think that that's the biggest part of the misinformation, and that what we work hard every day to try to correct is that, understanding what's helpful in this journey, understanding what hormone therapy is, understanding who can take it, who can't, understanding where it helps, and then understanding the long-term benefits of taking care of those symptoms, because things like hot flashes aren't a joke, and things like hot flashes can cause other problems down the line. So, the three big areas that most doctors and experts say, to really be looking at is, you're looking at your brain health, and you're looking at your heart health and your bone health. And that's what the concern always is. If you're not paying attention to some of these symptoms and going, I can suck it up and get through it. I think the most important thing is understanding the long term of that, making sure you protect yourself.
Absolutely. And I know some of those symptoms that you described. I mean, I think that's pretty much every woman, and regardless of time of their lives, right? Like, we all feel so thinly stretched across our lives. I mean, there's so much going on. And so I think it can be difficult to ascertain whether this is something deeper, this is something like menopause or perimenopause, versus just stress or anxiety. And I think that's one thing that I think is really critical about this conversation, because we need to figure out what's normal and what's not. And of course, menopause is normal, but these symptoms can be alleviated through the help of hormone replacement therapy, like you suggested, and other sorts of interventions. And women need to be emboldened to go and take this on and have these conversations, both with their doctors and their friends.
Yes. Yeah, no question at all. And I think that that's it. I mean, these are not things that, I certainly wasn't talking about these things with my friends growing up.
Who knew?
But I definitely think it is so important. And I get excited to see younger people having that conversation, because we didn't, and we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look around, I mean, who else are you seeing doing really important work that we should be following as well?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I was actually going to put together this list, and I'm going to do this for you on Instagram with some of the different people to follow, because there's some great people that are doing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of great doctors out there, good companies out there. And I'm going to do that. And you reminded me of that because I was thinking about it. This list, because, we have this this menosphere out there.
I like that term, menosphere.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we know who's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think your story is one that I find inspiring, because it has your chapters have unfolded over time in a way that probably was pretty surprising to you. I would imagine you probably didn't set out. I mean, from journalism to menopause advocacy, it's not a straight line there. So what has that journey been like for you?
Gosh, I don't think it's been a straight line. I think but I do think that I'm still a storyteller at the end of the day, and that storytelling has changed. And so I think that's what I'm hopeful about. So it wasn't like I just kind of changed careers completely, but I think I just stopped telling one story in hopes of being able to focus on the other ones. And so that makes me feel good, because I think, I don't know if I could learn a new skill set right now.
You seem to be doing quite well with some of the newer parts of it, I would imagine, although I'm sure that social media is always an aspect of your journalism career. But I mean, what you've done, it seems, is create just this really vibrant community of women, which is really wonderful to see.
Thank you.
And it's been really fun to follow along. And what I also really love about the way in which you operate is you infuse everything with a little bit of humor and lightheartedness. And this world can feel so dark sometimes. So dark. When you look around, what gives you hope about this all changing in terms of the way we view aging in this society?
Oh, I think that sharing these stories of women that are really thriving and doing different things, women and men, I think we use the term longevity a lot, but I think that, for me, longevity is not just living longer, but living really well. I just came back from a trip to Spain with my 84-year-old dad. And, I'd always worried about his health my whole life. And just to see him do what he did. And I'm like, he's 84. He had more energy than my dad and my husband and I put together. And I was like, amazing. So that's what that inspires me. And I think hearing those stories inspires other people to be like, I want to do that too. So, I just think that that's important. I think it's important we share those stories. And I think it's important we pay attention to things earlier, not wait until we start having the symptoms and wait until we start feeling awful, and try to develop a few of those habits that we can incorporate in our lives that don't feel like a to-do list chore, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say to women who are struggling with this, who maybe haven't stepped into their power in this realm or haven't found the confidence to address some of these things, especially when it comes to the workplace? I mean, it can be, I imagine, incredibly isolating, especially in male-dominated industries, to be going through this, right?
Yeah, I would say there are women waiting for you, and wait.
I love that.
I don't think that it's always easy, and I don't think you should do something that you don't feel comfortable doing. But I hope in time, the more that we do this, maybe somebody else can speak up for them so they don't have to, but at least they can have the benefits of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so lovely about what's happening now with this growing movement of awareness of ageism and what you're doing with menopause advocacy, because we are making the future better for the people who come up behind us. And I think we should always be thinking that way, right? Like maybe we should wake up on some other things like climate change, et cetera. But this is something that I think you are really making your imprint seen, and it's going to actively benefit people to come. So I want to thank you on behalf of all of
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, Tamsen. I applaud what you're doing, and I can't wait to see what else happens after this.
So I want to thank Tamsen for sitting down with me. She has an incredibly busy schedule. In fact, she's about to launch her brand new documentary, which is called The M Factor. It comes out on October 17th, so definitely check it out. And it is huge in the sense that it is the first documentary that has been accredited by the Continuing Medical Education Board, which is to say that doctors and physicians can go and actually learn about menopause from her work. So this is a huge deal. So really, really proud of what she is doing out there, really excited about all the waves she's making, and thrilled to see what comes next for her. So she's one to keep an eye on for sure. I will drop her handle and her website in the show notes for sure, so you can follow along. As I mentioned through the interview itself, she also makes everything kind of fun and relatable. So she's definitely worth a follow. Check it out. So really glad that she was able to make the show, and a big hat tip to Bradley Sherman, who's a past guest and put us together. So thank you so much for that. What's next when it comes to menopause? I want to ensure that I profile companies that are getting this right. We just profiled one that got it very wrong. We did not name the name of the company. And again, it's not on my LinkedIn. Do not go and look for it. It's not there. But I want to go ahead and highlight companies that are actually nailing this and doing a great job for their women in their workplaces. So let's do that. I also want to reach out and find some companies that are changing the game in the menopause space. So companies like MIDI, for example, that Tamsen referenced during the interview as well. And so I'll be looking for those types of companies to profile and talk about and speak with leaders at the companies as well. So if you have ideas on what you want to hear when it comes to menopause and aging at work and women's health in the workplace, would love to hear from you. So please reach out. Would love to get your perspective. Really glad we were able to get this show together, that we were able to have Tamsen here as the expert that she is in this realm, and just open the door to this conversation, because it really matters. And I'm obviously extremely passionate about advocating for people who are older in the workplace, and half of those people are women. So we got to talk about menopause. We got to get us where we need to be. And honestly, I'm excited that we are at the place where we are, where there are now a growing number of companies. There are a growing number of advocates like Tamsen openly addressing this topic. Some of them are doctors, some of them are journalists, some of them are average everyday people like you and me who want to educate the masses on what's going on with 51% of the population. So kudos to everybody who's already made their mark in this realm, and there's just so much more ahead of us. So really excited about that. And yes, it's Menopause Awareness Month, the month of October. So get out there and talk about it. We can't keep doing the thing that we used to do, which is basically just shoving it under the rug and pretending it's not happening. This is real. Do you think guys, if they had a physiological condition that hurt them and made their lives miserable, wouldn't be talking about it? It's time to get on top of this. I mean, pharmaceutical research has been so focused on men as subjects, and even male mice. That's something that's come up. So it's well past time that we work to focus in on women and women across the course of their whole lives, because the way women are physiologically younger in their lives is very different from how they are older in their lives. So that's another huge point that we need to emphasize. So lots to do, lots of headway to make, but we're at the very beginning here. And so I do have a lot of hope that things are going to shift and change. And I think as long as we continue to be vocal about it, and men, by the way, if you can be vocal about it, awesome, because we need you. We need you in this fight. And if you have, the ability to raise your voice in this particular field, it's only going to help your companies do better. I mean, hopefully you care for the ethical and moral reasons of helping a fellow man, woman in this case, but it's also just good business. So if that moral reason doesn't move you, look at it from the business perspective. There's a massive market out there to help women in menopause. Let's go get it. And tech, fund women founders. Come on. It's 2024 now. Like, let's do better. So anyway, thanks again, everybody, for joining me today. If this episode moved you, please share it with a friend. If it moved you and you're really feeling generous, I would love it if you could rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, because that kind of moves the needle. I hate that. I just said move the needle. I just said move the needle. You can take the girl out of corporate, but you can't take the corporate out of the girl, apparently. So yeah, it really does help grow the show if you do that. So if you've gotten anything out of the show, would really appreciate that. Also, shout out that I have a newsletter on itgetslateearly.com. Would love to have you in there. We'll send you updates about the show and related news and that sort of stuff. So I haven't really talked about it much, which is kind of weird. I should. So would love to have you there, especially if you've been a longtime listener of the show. So just more ways for us to connect and move things forward. So anyway, thank you so much.